Here's the question: should deaf parents trying for a baby through IVF have the right to choose to have a deaf child in preference to one without hearing problems?
Well, the government's new fertility law says no, but one deaf couple, Tomato Lucci and Paula Garfield, say that's discriminatory. They're with us, together with their daughter Molly, and also with us, their sign interpreter Kathy. So what's going to be happening is Tomato and Paula will be looking at us and also looking at Kathy so that we can get an idea of what's going on. Welcome. Hello to you all. Thank you very much for coming in. Firstly, tell us what the situation is with you. Are you going through IVF at the moment?
No, I'm 40 years old at the moment, and so we're hoping that we can have a second child. And if it happens, of course, that we can't have one naturally, then we would rely on using IVF as a treatment. So if this new law is passed, that means that we wouldn't have the right to choose if one of our embryos had the deafness gene in it. I mean, really, we're talking about we want the same rights for hearing and deaf people. If, at the moment, it says if the deafness gene is found in an embryo, that is discarded. And we feel that that's sort of discriminatory, and also that we're being treated inferior to hearing people. We want to be treated equally to hearing people. That's our main issue. And that's sort of the main point we want to make. So it's almost like they're saying that if there are embryos with the deafness gene in them, it's almost like they're saying that these embryos don't have the right to be born.
But it seems as if you would choose to have a child who is deaf rather than one who can hear.
I'd just like to clarify, we're not creating a deaf baby at all. I mean, what we're talking about is if embryos are created naturally, if some include the deafness gene and some don't, why is it that they discard the ones that have the deafness gene in them? We feel that, you know, sort of deaf people have the right to be born just as hearing people do. It's about equality, really. I think at the moment, Tomato saying that at the moment we don't have the right to choose as hearing people do. I mean, if it's random selection, that's absolutely fine, because then that's more natural. But I think it's almost like everybody should have the right to choose rather than sort of one group not. It's about equality, really.
You can choose not to know, can't you? But you can choose not to have the screening process at all with IVF, and then it would be a matter of chance.
I mean, absolutely, but there are sort of some problems there too. Like, for example, my father survived a heart attack. My mother had cancer. Paula has a history of cancer in her family. So if we don't have the screening or the testing, then we've got a sort of a higher risk of that child having problems later. And it's almost like that's a punishment, really.
So you would screen your embryos. If the embryos created, you would screen the embryos. And if there was a deaf embryo, you would choose to have that embryo implanted above the others. Is that true?
I mean, what we're talking about is what we have that's already there. If embryos have already been created, if they're they have the deafness gene in them, that's nature, that's natural. And you know, I mean, how can I explain to Molly, for example, oh, you couldn't have a deaf sister or brother because you know, sort of this legislation meant that those embryos were discarded?
Well, people writing this morning are quite moved about this idea and quite critical, actually, of the choices that you're making. Ken Godwin thinks it's cruel in that you think it's okay to bring a disabled child, as he puts it, into the world deliberately. Somebody else saying, isn't this a form of child abuse?
I think they're forgetting we're not designing a deaf baby. We're not creating a baby that's deaf. What we're talking about is embryos that are already created. They're already there. If naturally they have the deafness gene in them, then yes, I'd want to choose them to be implanted. Deafness is not a life-threatening illness. You can't die from it. We're not severely disabled. I mean, Tomato's saying, really, how many parents would pick that? I mean, why are they creating this law? I mean, it's almost, you know, we're talking about the issue of eugenics in a way. The government are forcing us that you have to discard these deaf embryos, and I think it's sort of allowing us to choose, please, as you're allowing hearing people to choose.
But if you do have a choice, would you choose the embryo that is deaf over the embryo that can hear?
Yes, we would pick the embryo that had the, you know, the deafness gene in it. If my life had been full of suffering or pain, then I wouldn't choose that to be deaf. But my life, I mean, I'm very independent. I feel, you know, I don't have any barriers in my life.
If I might interrupt, you're talking about eugenics. That is also a form of eugenics, isn't it?
creating a law, why are they saying we're not allowed to pick? That we must choose one that have the hearing gene in it. I just want it to be equal, the same as hearing people that have the right to choose to have it discarded. Almost everyone should have the same right. Should everyone be allowed to choose or nobody be allowed to choose? We're being forced to choose. Why do we have to discard these deaf embryos? It's almost like you're saying deaf people don't have the right to be born. Other countries are dealing with this issue as well, but their sort of take on it is that you sort of create fewer embryos and then all of them are implanted and then you wait for nature to take its course.
Would that be the preferable option for you? I mean, do you want a choice or do you not really want the choice?
We just want equality. We want the same rights as hearing people. I mean, imagine if, you know, the new law was forcing all hearing parents to pick deaf babies. You know, there'd be absolute outrage. And we feel that, but in reverse.
Well, very stimulating debate. Thank you,
Thank
all
you.
three,
Thank you.
very much. Thank you.
Thanks.
And Kathy, thanks to you too. It's 18 minutes past.